Hello, uh, Johan Mellison here from Langley, British Columbia. Um, just, yeah, talking to you a little bit about the spiritual practice of forgiveness. Uh, and so I just want to give you a bit of a context as to kind of why I chose that and why I think that might be a good fit for my workplace and also my life. Um, so, as you may know or remember, I'm an assistant principal at a high school in Surrey, British Columbia, and I am in a student life position. And so, what that means is anything having to do with students, student related, student support is something that I do, among other things. Um, so, a big part of that is conflict resolution. And so, anything disciplinary, anytime problems arise between students, that would kind of fall on my lap, and that's how kind of I navigate my day to day. So it's often that I have students in my office, or if I'm talking in the hall about something relatively either minor or kind of definitely some more serious things as well. Um, so that's why I think the practice of forgiveness aligns really closely my with my workplace. I think a couple of things from the course that stood out about forgiveness to me was, well, especially that the Wolf article that we read. It was called "How Can I Forgive?" I think it might have been a chapter in a book. Um, but a couple of things that he said that I think stood out about forgiveness. One was, um, it's more complex than just saying I forgive you, because what you're doing is actually you're giving something to somebody. So it's similar to gratitude in that way. You're giving something, um, but you're giving something to someone who has wronged you. Whereas gratitude, you might be giving something uh, to somebody who has done something kind to you, or so you're giving in that way. But forgiveness, you're giving something to somebody who has actually wronged you, which would be um, more difficult. And the other piece is the measurement that he used in terms of whether or not forgiveness has happened is whether or not guilt remains. And I know it's a bit more complex than that, but I appreciated that quote because it shows kind of the result of forgiveness, which is kind of a place where there's no guilt remaining. And I think that uh, was inspiring, but also telling in terms of what that practice could mean. It was reminiscent to me of how Nick Wolterstorff, who I don't think we learned about him in the course, but something that stood out to me about how he defined justice as a moving to a place of no harm. And that's how I tried to view justice in my workplace, um, is not coming down with a punitive punishment per se, but actually moving both parties or all parties involved to a place of no harm. I think that aligns pretty closely with that definition of forgiveness, where um, the measurement is how much harm is still remaining here, and then that can actually tell us whether or not forgiveness has happened. Um, so a real benefit to practicing forgiveness in the true sense of the word in my workplace is because it can serve as like a measurement of sorts in terms of how well we've done or not done in reconciling whatever conflict has come up. And so by asking people, like at the end, let's say if there's a restorative conference or a conversation, asking at the end, is there anything else you need, or what else uh, what else do you need in order to make this right? Um, and the responses to that could serve to show whether or not forgiveness has actually happened or been accepted. Um, and it can show how much resolution has actually taken place between, for example, two kids who, um, just gotten some kind of argument over something and it blew up or whatever. Um, So I see a few direct applications in my workplace. The the most direct application would be just in restoring relationships when they go wrong. So, um, that whether or not conflict happens in a community is not a measurement of a good community, because every community will have conflict. Um, but so in my workplace, I think about all the relationships that exist there between student and student, student and teacher, teacher and parent, parent to parent, staff to the board. There's conflict and harm that happens with all those relationships, and so a direct application of this practice of forgiveness, but in the true sense of the word forgiveness, um, is the restoration of all those relationships when things go wrong. Thinking about something that happened recently where a decision was made by the board that really hurt a lot of staff members, and there wasn't a lot of, and I'm not saying it was a bad decision at all, I'm just saying that there is a lot of hurt between that relationship, the board staff relationship. And so if I'm thinking about what it means to move on from that, I think that it's not okay just to kind of bury what happened, but actually to find a place for people to talk and be heard, so that forgiveness can happen, so that we can move on. So I think that's that that, but also like student to student thing, that's more obvious, teacher to teacher, um, and parent to teacher, and so on. Those are a lot of examples of how forgiveness can be a direct application to the workplace. Um, Another direct application obviously is being at home with my kids. I have 4 kids, and yeah, it's often the case where there's an apology said for something that happens. Let's say if we get one of our kids to apologize to us as parents for whatever, throwing a temper tantrum or saying something unkind or whatever, it's easy to say, or to have them to say I'm sorry, and then for us to continue lecturing. And a direct application, I think, is at home, to be able to move on from when the words I'm sorry are said. So I'm sorry, and that there's a genuine way of feeling bad about what they did, to move on from that quickly and to kind of water under the bridge, and okay, you're forgiven. But being forgiveness doesn't mean holding something over anybody's head. So I think that's a good application at home too. And my suggestion for others would be to understand that this is a tension. So the measurement of forgiveness happening when there's when guilt doesn't remain. Well, that doesn't happen all the time, and so I understand that there's going to be a tension between that measurement. But what if something happens where somebody harms somebody, but they don't actually know or think that they harmed somebody? Sometimes forgiveness has to be given to somebody who doesn't actually think they need forgiveness. So I know that there's going to be some tension there, and it's messier than just that. So my suggestion would be just to live in that, and yeah. So that's my presentation on forgiveness. So have a good day.